And we're back for part 2. Actually, this is part 3 now of covering the whole Ethan versus Hasan drama. Specifically, part 3 of covering the latest episode of Ethan's kind of crusade against Hasan. So let's get into it. I am a little bit sleep deprived, so do not blame me if I am loopy and say some crazy stuff in this coverage.
2+. I started watching his streams the past year.
We covered Galia's story about her escaping Ukraine, compared it to Israel, and compared Russia's invasion of Ukraine to Israel's invasion of Gaza. Then we covered an episode of Leftovers where Hasan and Ethan kind of got into a bit of a misunderstanding about the role that media plays in manufacturing support for specific issues, specifically among the American population. And we kind of cleared up Hasan's current stance on Ukraine. So from about a month ago, we saw that Hasan really stands for the sovereignty of the Ukrainian people. And now we are going to get into the fun stuff. The clip chimping of Hasan. Let it begin.
And every time he speaks about Ukraine, his every single take sounds like the first step to Russian propaganda, which is just ridiculous. Every time I hear there are Nazis in the Ukrainian army, or that could have been Ukraine, the most ridiculous one is Crimea take, which was a sure trigger for today.
Just going to skip through this. This is Galia reading her letter.
Send the link.
Dan has it.
Have it, Dan?
We covered this already.
It should be in the doc.
Yeah.
Under I put a section there.
I got it.
And there's a folder.
But that's when that was
and
the
they should be numbered 1 through 4 in there.
The first time I started being like, what the fuck? Like, who is this guy? When on the show with Hasan was when he started talking about like Ukraine and Thailand. And I was like,
Taiwan. Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, Taiwan. I mean,
He says Thailand. I'm like, wait, Hasan talking about Thailand? I think Ethan's been thinking about Dan Clancy going to Thailand to practice sex tourism a little bit too much. He's got Thailand on the brain. Also, it is funny that Ethan's like, what is Hasan talking about? Ukraine and Taiwan? And then he just, ignores it. He kind of rage quits that issue.
and I was like, the fuck is this? It just kind of like.
But that's the first
that
time
was
I
like the
noticed
first time I
Hasan
heard
was
it from
being a
him.
little weird.
Initially I saw the clip that's going to be like number 1 here.
You want me to open number 1?
Yeah. And I saw it on TikTok and it was a clip chimp.
The reason why Russia's doing military
So hold on, let me. I gotta download it. So
I saw it.
Actually, here. Maybe this is fine. I'll just play it in the
I think
window.
it's fine.
Hold on.
Because I thought it's kind of like clip chimped because you can hear him yelling and I was like, I'm going to save it.
exercises
Yeah, go ahead.
because NATO's been expansionist. The Ukrainian government has quite literally fucking said we're going to overtake Crimea again. Crimea is literally just Russian territory. Don't give a fuck if you don't consider it that way, but that's the reality. The people in Crimea feel that way. The Crimean Navy feels that way. The Crimean military bases that were Russian military bases until historically and still to this day feel that
He's
way.
just saying Crimea belongs to Russia, so they're right to take it.
Yes.
Just straight up.
Yeah. Just
Based on what?
based on there are Russians there and they speak Russian language.
That's so bold. It's such a bold stance to take that nobody notices too. That nobody seems to care about. That's the thing with Hasan is that like.
I love that. Ethan's like, that's so bold. That's so bold. Yeah, politics are bold when you make prescriptive or even descriptive statements can sometimes be bold and controversial. And I also love the fact that he's like, nobody's noticing it. Why isn't anybody criticizing Hasan for it? Well, there's kind of one reason why no one's criticizing him, and it's because it doesn't fucking matter right now. It's 10 years old. Like, that was a topic that kind of was important 10 years ago. It's not like we're trying to give or take support for the United States giving Crimea back to Russia. It's not like we're telling people, oh, call your representative. Let's get Crimea back to Ukraine. I told you I was tired. I misspoke. Call your senator and tell them that you support the return of Crimea to Ukraine. That's not a thing that's happening. And when we're getting this full-scale invasion of Russia that took place in 2022, when we're getting this full-scale invasion from Russia in like Ukraine proper, and I hope that doesn't piss people off. I'm just using it to describe the non-Crimean areas of Ukraine. That's a much more pressing issue than 10 years ago Russia annexed Crimea and we didn't really do anything about it. So again, it could make people mad. But I just want to say this up top. All of this talk about Crimea that Galia and Ethan and Tila jump onto is pretty irrelevant. It really does not matter at all. And it's not like, I'm just going to say this. It's not like Hasan saying that, yeah, Russia took over Crimea and they were able to take it over because there are Russian people living in Crimea, is hurting support for Ukraine. Hasan has always been pro-Ukraine, and even if he has had potentially controversial and questionable issues or takes on the Crimean issue, that doesn't negate any of the support he's given to Ukraine. And like, he's raised money for Ukraine. He's kind of done some critical analysis of anti-Ukrainian takes that we watched in the last video that I did on this. He's always been staunchly Ukraine. So if they're going to paint him with an anti-Ukrainian brush, it just really doesn't fit. And they're using very specific like issues, like Hasan talking about Crimea, to, I'm not going to say defame, but characterize him in a way that is very dishonest.
I started to slowly realize, like, this is not normal. Like, this is extreme politics.
Actually, that is pretty normal. That's kind of why the idea of Ukraine being taken over by Russia is debated. This is kind of a normal view that people have. I think Hasan happens to be incorrect on this, but we can get into that a little bit later. But I love that whenever Ethan sees something that he doesn't like that Hasan said, he doesn't really have any criticisms of it, because again, Ethan is very uneducated on politics and doesn't have great comprehension skills. So he'll just say this is a radical thing to do.
It's like completely, in my opinion, nuts.
When I saw it first time, I honestly thought that he was just yelling at the chatter, because I've seen his streams and he's just doing it. And I saw like a little clip there, but then I watched the whole thing and then the other stuff. Yeah.
You can't just be Ukraine and be like, it doesn't matter. My constitution decided and declared that like Crimea is actually not Russian territory, regardless of how many fucking people live in, how many Russians live there, and regardless of the fact that those people want to be back with Russia. We don't care. We're gonna fucking invade it. If you say something like that, of course he's gonna fucking flex his dick. He's not a good guy. He's a bad guy. Okay. Throw the question marks all you want. I don't give a fuck about the Ukrainian constitution. I don't give a fuck about the Ukrainian like border sovereignty that some of you dumbasses are fucking talking about. Like you're like a 3%er, but for Ukraine. Okay, it's so stupid. Crimea is not the same as Kiev, however. Crimea is not the same as the rest of Ukraine, however. Eastern Ukrainian territories have a lot of fucking.
He's pretty much.
Can I pause for a second?
Yeah.
He says Crimea is not like rest of Ukraine, and then he says eastern part of Ukraine. He like immediately got another 40% of the territory right in the next sentence. He's like, oh yeah, Crimea is different. By the way, other 40% are just the same.
It's kind of exactly what Putin.
Yeah, Hasan didn't say that they're just the same. He didn't say that Russia's justified in taking over Eastern European territories. Like you're clipping Hasan. Just let the clip play before you stop it mid-sentence and then react to that, because let's just run it back. Let's run it back.
Can I pause for a second?
Yeah.
He says Crimea is not.
Okay, it's so stupid. Crimea is not the same as Kiev, however. Crimea is not the same as the rest of Ukraine, however. Eastern Ukrainian territories have a lot of fucking.
He's pretty much.
Can I pause for a second?
Yeah.
He says Crimea is not like rest of Ukraine, and then he says eastern part of Ukraine. He like immediately.
Yeah, he said Eastern European territories have a lot of Russian people in it. That's what his sentence was. There's a difference between saying, "Oh yeah, Eastern Ukraine has Russians in it," and saying that Crimea is like Russia, or he doesn't respect the claim of that Ukraine has on Crimea. He's not saying that all eastern parts of Ukraine should be annexed by Russia. That's not what he's saying at all. And it's funny, like they're clip jumping him within the clip.
Immediately got another 40% of the territory right in the next sentence. He's like, oh yeah, Crimea is different. By the way, other 40% are just the same.
It's kind of exactly what Putin wants. He doesn't.
Yes.
He's like, I don't want.
That's not what he said at all. He said there's Russian people living in eastern parts of Europe, right? Am I mishearing that?
of Ukraine. However, Eastern Ukrainian territories have a lot of fucking.
He's pretty much. He's
Can I
like,
pause for a second?
Yeah.
He says
Okay,
Crimea is
Eastern
not
Ukrainian territories have a lot of Russians in
like
it.
rest of Ukraine, and then he says eastern part of Ukraine. He like immediately got another 40% of the territory right in the next sentence. He's like, oh yeah, Crimea is different. By the way, other 40% are just the same.
it's kind of exactly what Putin wants. He doesn't. He's
Yes.
like, I don't want the whole country. I just want like the entire East Coast.
Sometimes I feel like whenever he goes home, he just puts like a Putin Bible and reads it by heart, like before he goes to bed, because like his talking
It's
points,
kind of funny from
some of them
Galia.
are like verbatim of whatever Tucker Carlson is
I
saying.
wonder, like, where does it come from? Why is he so confident about it? Like, where is he fucking getting these?
I've never seen that place on the left side of politics. Like I've never met anyone mentioning it before. I met like this like deep route that I went to research. Yeah.
Shall I
It's
keep
kind of
playing it?
funny.
Yeah, it's getting
Russian
more
people living in
insane.
them.
I agree. I kind of agree with what Galia said there. It is kind of like, oh, where is Hasan coming up with that? And I think that we'll see that there is an answer to this. So let's just continue.
Because Ukraine and just like Crimea and much of the rest of the fucking country was a part of Russia, was a part of the USSR until not that long ago. Okay.
USSR. That was a
People-
long time ago.
Ukraine was not a part of Russia. It was a sovereign republic. Its USSR is a union of sovereign republics, and Russia was Russia, and Ukraine was Ukraine.
But are we saying that every?
Yeah, but also, to be fair, Crimea was a sovereign republic as well. It was on the same level as Ukraine within the USSR. It was a republic, and then it got absorbed by Ukraine within the USSR. So it became a like a special region within the Republic of Ukraine during the USSR. So we can go over the timeline, and let's actually just get into it right now. This is fun. Who wants a history lesson on Crimea? If you donate to me, I'm going to donate to Wikipedia. I haven't done it for a few years, but let's say first $10 that I make off of this channel will go to supporting this website. So we are on the Crimean page. Crimea. First of all, let's pull up a map because I'm sure that people aren't, aware of where it is off the top of their head. So we'll go here. So on the southern part of Ukraine in the Black Sea and the Azov Sea, so it kind of separates these two seas, and so it's extremely important. It's an extremely important region for kind of controlling these two seas, the Black Sea and the Azov Sea. If anyone's ever played the board game Diplomacy, you know how important it is to control the Black Sea. So that is the map, and you can see how it does kind of look separate from Ukraine, and that's why underneath the Soviet Union, it was its own republic. Okay, so let's go back to here. So let's read some ancient history and then kind of get more and more modern. Called the Tauric Peninsula until the early modern period, Crimea has historically been at the boundary between the classical world and the steppe. Greeks colonized its southern fringe and were absorbed by the Roman and Byzantine empires and successor states while remaining culturally Greek. Okay, so we got culturally Greek. Some cities became trading colonies of Genoa until conquered by the Ottoman Empire. Gotta turn this down. Until conquered by the Ottoman Empire. Throughout this time, the interior was occupied by a changing cast of steppe nomads coming under the control of the Golden Horde in the 13th century, from which the Crimean Khanate emerged as a successor state. In the 15th century, the Khanate became a dependency of the Ottoman Empire. Lands controlled by Russia and Poland-Lithuania were often the target of slave raids during this period. In 1783, after the Russo-Turkish War, the Russian Empire annexed Crimea. So this was in 1783. So in 1783, the Russian Empire annexed Crimea. Crimea's strategic position led to the 1854 Crimean War and many short-lived regimes following this 1917 Russian Revolution. When the Bolsheviks secured Crimea, it became an autonomous Soviet republic within the Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. So, So when the Bolsheviks secured Crimea, it became an autonomous Soviet republic within the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. Okay, this music's stupid. I'm sorry. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do the music. Spent too much time on it. So yeah, it was an autonomous republic underneath the Soviet Union. It was occupied by Germany during World War II. When the Soviets retook it in 1944, Crimean Tatars were ethnically cleansed and deported under the orders of Joseph Stalin. in what has been described as a cultural genocide. If we can look up what the Crimean Tatars are, they are a Turkish ethnic group. So you're wondering where Hasan is coming up with this. He has a bit more knowledge of Crimean history than the average person, I would say, even the average Ukrainian, and especially the average American. He knows about these Crimean Tatars, who are a Turkish ethnic group indigenous to Crimea. And after the Soviet Union retook Crimea in World War II, these indigenous people were ethnically cleansed from the area. So they were ethnically cleansed and deported under the orders of Joseph Stalin in what has been described as a cultural genocide. I would agree with that description. Crimea was downgraded to an oblast in 1945. In 1954, the USSR transferred the oblast to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic on the 300th anniversary of the Pereyaslav Treaty in 1654. After Ukrainian independence in 1991, the central government and the Republic of Crimea clashed, with the region being granted more autonomy. So in 1991, you see some separation from the main government of Ukraine and the Republic of Crimea. So you already see some seeds for autonomy in Crimea in 1991. So the Soviet fleet in Crimea was also in contention, but a 1997 treaty allowed Russia to continue basing its fleet in Sevastopol. In 2014, the peninsula was occupied by Russian forces and annexed by Russia, but most countries recognize Crimea as a Ukrainian territory. So right off the bat, Crimea has had a very rocky history, obviously being in such an important geographical location. There's going to be many different imperial nations kind of taking it over, and the people that live there basically have no sovereignty whatsoever. And we can take a look at like how long it's been associated with Ukraine in kind of its present day status. Whoops, headphone died. So in 1917, it became an autonomous Soviet republic, and then in 1945, it was kind of pushed into the Ukrainian Republic. So that's what, 28 years where it was independent, and then from 1945 to 1991 it was with Ukraine underneath the Soviet Union, and then in 2014 the Russian Federation took it back over. So what, it's had 25 years of being independent underneath the Soviet Union, and then 46 years of being a part of Ukraine underneath the Soviet Union, and then 25 years being a part of Ukraine, and now 10 years being a part of Russia again. So all that being said, like when the borders were drawn at the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was definitely a part of Ukraine, but an autonomous region. So there is a difference between the autonomous region of Crimea and just eastern regions of Ukraine. And then Russia took it over. So let's just talk about this. Just because the people in Crimea would rather be a part of Russia, does that mean that Russia should invade it? I don't think so. There are valid reasons for Crimea to be a part of, for Crimeans to want to be a part of Russia. I think there are valid reasons, but just because those reasons are valid doesn't mean that Russia should annex like a region that is controlled by Ukraine, basically. And we can also talk about how the annexing wasn't actually a representation of the wishes of the people that lived there. And we can actually take a look. So Russian occupation from 2014. So in 2014, Crimea saw demonstrations against the removal of the Russia-leaning Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych and protests in support of Euromaidan. Ukrainian historian Volodymyr Holovko estimates 26 February protests in support of the integrity of Ukraine at 12,000 people, opposed by several thousand pro-Russian protesters. On the 27th of February, Russian forces occupied parliament and government buildings and other strategic points in Crimea, and the Russian Organized Republic of Crimea declared independence from Ukraine following an illegal and internationally unrecognized referendum. Russia then annexed Crimea, although most countries continue to recognize Crimea as part of Ukraine. So you can see here that Russia's pretext for invading this very geographically important region is that the people there want to become a part of Russia. However, this was done under very shady circumstances, such as with the Russian military controlling strategic points in Crimea. So you're kind of voting in this referendum while the military of a person that you might not want to oppose because their military is there, they're almost aiming guns at you. So should a referendum be counted if it's done under gunpoint? I don't think so. And I know that Hasan has always been in favor of the sovereignty of the Ukrainian people, but I think he should also focus on the people that live in Crimea and their sovereignty. And Russia occupying Crimea is not the best groundwork for having a diplomatic and really true referendum on whether they should join Russia or not, right? So that's my point. And I think Hasan should be consistent on this. If he's supporting Ukrainian sovereignty and the will of the Ukrainian people, he should definitely do that with Crimea as well. But he doesn't really do that. And let's continue on this clip.
Every province of that used to be USSR belongs to
Yes.
fucking Putin. I mean,
Let's
what are we
get
doing here?
Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan,
What the fuck?
Latvia, Lithuania,
That's
anything.
straight up insane Russian fucking imperialism, psycho.
That's exactly he's listening to him saying that shit, and then he yells it at the chatter. He's on February 22nd, he's done this insane speech whenever he said so Peter the First, the Tsar or whatever.
That insane rant he did with Tucker. Yeah.
Parents were alive back then. So obviously, there's a lot of fucking Russian people living there and saying they're doing imperialism, okay? Russia's annexation of Crimea is not the same as imperialism. It's not the same as colonialism. You are a fucking psycho.
Despite the fact that they're literally moving into people's houses.
Oh yeah, or taking over the land. The land has been completely seized from so Ukrainians cannot get it in heritage from their parents or whoever died in Crimea.
So I do want to say that I think this is the worst Hasan take that I've covered since I've started this whole drama. Russia annexing Ukraine is absolutely colonization. It's absolutely imperialization from Russia's point of view. If they flood the airways with pro-Russian propaganda, if they do a referendum while they're occupying the territory, especially during a period of extreme political turmoil, they just ousted a very pro-Russian president and what's that fucking guy's name? Ukraine had just ousted a very pro-Russian president. I think that this is a pretty clear example of Russian imperialism. And then, I don't think you can really talk about I don't think saying that there's Russian people living there is any reason to support Russia annexing Ukraine. That's kind of crazy to me. And then lastly, even if the people in Crimea support getting annexed by Russia, that doesn't mean that it's not Russian imperialism. Russia can create conditions which would cause people to want to be a part of Russia, especially in Crimea, that is a more autonomous region of Ukraine, and they do have a very closer relationship with Russia, both geographically, and we see that the Russian fleet is stationed there, so there's Russian military bases there. They speak Russian. They are ethnically Russian and like culturally Russian because Russia settled Crimea when they ethnically displaced all of the Tatar people there. So, like, there are reasons why. Like, let's even say that the referendum was an accurate depiction of the will of the people there, and it was true democracy at work, a true referendum, and representative of their sovereignty. If that's the case, it still would be an example of Russian imperialism. Just as I'm sure Hasan would say that, oh, there's genuine reasons for South Korea to want to have very strong diplomatic relations with America. That America provides them with millions of dollars in military support. There's so many cultural exports there. South Korea's exports a lot to the United States. But that's still an example of American imperialism and the tactics that America uses to get South Korea to have like good relationships with it is similar to the tactics that Russia uses. They kind of like culturally settle the territory. They make their culture more amenable to them than kind of their neighbors. They cause economic incentives to be closer to them. So the economic incentive of being part of Russia might be that Crimea was not getting as many good trades with America or the UN or the EU as kind of Ukraine proper was getting. They have more close dealings with Russia. So again, it's examples of imperialism that could incentivize Crimea to want to be a part of Russia, but that's still imperialism. It doesn't change the fact that it's still imperialism.
Without a Russian passport right now, or all the Crimean Tatars media has been seized. There are like 150 political prisoners right now in Crimea to this day that has been like arrested for showing any support to Ukraine, and it has been happening for 10 years, and they're like just arrested and they're just like somewhere in a good place. I don't know.
That does not sound like a healthy transition there.
I feel like
Sounds
for me,
colonialism.
I'm not like super educated on topics like this, and so Hasan just seemed like he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, he says a lot of really smart words.
He talks with like such authority, and like, he's so aggressive about it. Like he's right. He has to be right.
And it's like a Trojan horse because 90% of the stuff he says, I'm like obviously deeply in agreement with.
And whenever
I didn't realize that he held such extreme beliefs, and then once I heard it, I started being like, wait, what the fuck is going on?
What I wrote in my notes, the title of this like whole thing is "Limited Hangout" by Hasan Piker. And what he does the limited hangout propaganda. Whenever he says 90% all truths, I support you in those 90%. Like I definitely pro-Union, pro-Palestine, but like those 10% that you push are completely insane, and those are the only 10% that people remember. And this is the type of propaganda that everyone uses around, type of propaganda that Tucker uses,
influencing a lot
Fox News
of
are
people
using.
with these
He's just
takes.
the same. And like, yeah, just listen until the end. It's getting crazy.
There has never been a circumstance in which an imperial power has decided to take over land where the fucking people living in that land are their own people, okay? And the country's entire military is like, oh yeah, this is great. Finally, we can like work with our own fucking country, and we speak the language, and it's our country, and we want to actually join. And then they also fucking correspond.
So just one thing about this, looking at the demographics of the Crimean region during the occupation, and we can see here that in 2014 when Russia invaded or annexed it, there was 69% of the population, 67% of the population was Russian, 15% was Ukrainian, 10% was the Crimean Tatars, so the indigenous people, and then there was some other people from other enclaves from different European areas. But to say that it's like only Russian people living there is an inaccurate statement. And again, Hasan is both ignoring the fact that the referendum that really caused the annexation of Crimea to Russia was done under like extreme circumstances and is not internationally recognized as a valid referendum. Russia was literally occupying Crimea at the time. And that even if it was a valid referendum, it would still be an example of Russian imperialism because they created these material conditions to make Crimea more amenable to being annexed by Russia. And I think Hasan would recognize this in all sorts of ways that America does it, such as like its relations with Taiwan, its taking over of Puerto Rico, Hawaii, all of these things where, you know, they apply cultural, political, economic pressure onto these territories that we have our eye on, and then those territories like bend and kind of do whatever America wants.
To numerous surveys time and time again, year over year over year, leading up to fucking the Crimean annexation.
Under threat of violence, sounds like. These surveys.
Even after the Crimean annexation, saying, no, it's good. We want to be a part of Russia.
One thing? He tells people that there are polls happening after annexation of Crimea, that people want to live in Crimea. At least the estimation of at least 700,000 Russians who are new settlers in Crimea since 2014. In the past 10 years, at least 700,000 people came to that peninsula and started a life there. Of course, they want to be a part of Russia. This is like, I don't know, like
they're Russian pilgrims.
What kind of poll do you want to get from that?
So I do love the idea that Ethan is like, these Russian pilgrims are helping Russia colonize Crimea, and I mean, he's either unable to see it or unwilling to talk about it when Israel sends pilgrims into Gaza and the West Bank, and now southern Lebanon as well.
Do you want to like leave? Yes, I want. Okay.
Yeah.
Fucking insane. You could say that's like Russian propaganda or whatever, but like you feeling bad about the Crimean annexation does not change the reality of the Crimean annexation being a completely justifiable fucking act by the Russian government. Okay, so that's it. That's fine. And Hitler invaded countries based on Germanic ties at first. Yeah, dude. Talk to me when he's fucking throwing Ukrainians in a fucking... What are you talking about? Talk to me when he's throwing Ukrainians in a concentration camp, okay? Hitler wasn't fucking bad because he decided to invade Austria. He was bad because he was fucking killing Jews.
Well, hold the fucking phone. We didn't even know he was killing Jews until like after the war. That's definitely not true. What the fuck are you...
Just one comment there. It's like that's kind of the opposite of Candace Owens' take on Hitler. Candace Owens was like, Hitler's bad because he was invading other countries. If he just stayed in Germany and took care of Germans, then he would have been fine, which is extremely funny. Once again, I think I've criticized Hasan enough. I've said my piece. I think he is wrong on this account. Wrong two ways.
Talking about.
Yeah, that's a real bad take.
Hitler was bad because he was a belligerent psychopath that was fucking invading all the countries in Europe because he wanted to take over all of Europe. Like, what the fuck are you even... Was this a Nazi apologia now? Like, what the fuck?
He's bordering on it.
There's more?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Okay, that was the problem. He wasn't like, oh yeah, we're gonna fucking annex territory with like Germanic people in it. That wasn't the main problem with Hitler, I think. That was like maybe 8 down the line.
I love that caveat that he
That's
adds.
crazy.
Also, that is funny. 8 down the line, like, okay, he added that caveat in the end. 8th down the line, maybe you can come up with 7 things Hitler did that's worse than invading Poland. And just one more thing, like what Hasan's talking about is kind of true in the sense that Russia annexing Crimea was bad, but it's not as bad as some other colonization that we've seen, like specifically talking about ethnically displacing everyone that lived there before. We've seen that colonization, and I would argue that is much worse than annexing a place that you see as like ethnically on the same level as you, ethnically homogenous as you, and so you don't have to displace everyone that's lived there. And I'm sure people were displaced, like especially like pro-Ukrainian people that wanted to be a part of Ukraine when Russia took it over. So there was displacement, but I don't think there was that much displacement, at least compared to some other examples of colonization that we've seen in the world.
I think as well.
They occupied Paris. I mean, they occupied France. They invaded Poland.
And then I was like, okay, so this is insane. And this clip has been chipped a lot of times and brought to Hasan. The only critique that he addresses about Ukraine is that he didn't know that the war would happen. Of course, no one knew. And like the way he brushes it off is like, yes, I was wrong about Ukrainian war start. And I'm like, no, bro, this is not what everyone critiques you about. This is not the point. Like, yeah, of course you did gamble wrong, like whatever. But this is, if you go to 2,
It's like,
this is the next day. I was like, okay, I'm going to look at the next day. Maybe.
It's like a classic straw man. It's what he did to me.
It's
Yes.
like picking like, okay, you're mad about this
Yeah.
little thing,
The
He's like-
and
easiest thing for
ignoring
me to
it.
address.
Yeah, sorry that I didn't know how history would happen. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Invasion of
That was
Crimea
crazy. Yeah, that was crazy. That was really crazy.
So this is the next day, and at that point he was brutalized by his audience, and you can see it in the chat. And like people are like, what the fuck is happening? And this is like his calm thought, like
Just remember, Ethan continuously makes the point that Hasan is captured by his audience, which is why he needs to keep saying radical stuff. When I think I've never seen a more clear example of someone who is extremely belligerent with his audience.
thought about take 24
He
hours
slept
after.
on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did say that. Yes. I did say that. The annexation of Crimea is absolutely a justifiable annexation. Like, I don't understand how this is a difficult fucking thing for people to comprehend. You literally will point to immediately, like, oh, the constitution of Ukraine or whatever. But it's not the same. There's a difference between Kiev and Crimea.
Lived for 15
Can I
years.
It was
say one
totally.
thing? What he's pointing to is actually insane if you don't know any context about Crimean annexation, because like no one knows it. But what happened was there was a revolution of
Got my
dignity in
Wikipedia
Ukraine,
article
and
ready.
we overthrown our government. And I went to Euromaidan to protest it, and Yanukovych fled the country. And 5 days after that, Russia invaded
Yanukovych.
Crimea. Like Russian troops came into Crimea, and 2 weeks after, they made a referendum and said like, okay, we're a part of Russia. So they just took a moment of like the most
Like unstable.
weakness, unstable time in, because Yanukovych, the president that we had, pro-Russian one, he just fled the country, and there was like no government, no anything for like a while. And in those 2 weeks, Russia managed to like go inside the country, actually send their troops, which put in proofs, and then like do a referendum. Everyone wants yes, and okay, we're a part of Russia. And to say that that is justifiable is insane, because like a referendum is justifiable, but Russian referendum is not justifiable.
It's just like straight warmongering. I don't know where it's coming from. That's the
don't-
part that's
I
really
find it
like,
so
why is he
bizarre.
so dedicated to this?
Fucking justifiable. If the people that are living on that fucking piece of land are Russian, they have a long fucking history of being Russian. Okay, they have a longer history of being with Russia. Obviously, the Crimea.
Okay, so I'm just going to make the point that I think that one reason Hasan is being so adamantly kind of like talking about Crimea is that there is a history of Crimea being independent from Ukraine. Like, it's only been a part of Ukraine from what, in 1945. It was an autonomous republic from 1921 to 1945, and then in 1991, or in 1945, it was dissolved and became a part of Ukraine underneath the umbrella of the Soviet Union. And then in 1991, when Ukraine got independence, Crimea fought to become a more autonomous region as part of Ukraine. So there is this history of Crimea, while, like, of course, being geographically extremely close to Ukraine and being tied to it politically for a few decades, is tied to it politically from pretty much 1945 to 2014. So that'd be what, 70 years? And for 25 of those years, it was like its own, like a more autonomous part of it. So 70 years, that does set a lot of precedent, but there is a lot of precedent for Crimea being like separate from Ukraine. So I think that's like something that Galia is not really picking up on, that there is this history of Crimea being an autonomous region. And I think that because of its autonomy, there could be an argument being made that they should decide that if they wanted to go to Russia, they could. However, obviously, the circumstances that Russia annexed it was extremely undemocratic, and I would argue that you shouldn't really give any credence to that referendum or any credence to any polls since then. Yeah. So again, like, Galia is kind of focusing on Hasan's topic of conversation on Crimea and extrapolating that to be all of his Ukrainian opinions. So she's trying to say that because Hasan is like so fixated on Crimea, he is swallowing Putin's propaganda hook, line, and sinker, and he's saying that all like areas of Ukraine with a Russian population could be justifiably annexed. And that's, I think that even like in this circumstance, Hasan wouldn't say that. And I think that if you would go back and ask him, I think that if you would ask Hasan now, he'd be like, yeah, that was an example of Russian imperialism. It was an example of their colonial tactics. And that referendum was extremely undemocratic. And I think that if you really press him on it, he would be like, yeah, I'm not saying that Russia should annex it just because there are Russian people living there. I'm saying that they could potentially annex it because they have this autonomous region that does have a lot of individualism compared to proper Ukraine.
Crimean Tatars are different, straight up, like I admit.
20 months.
But even then, it's not fuck.
I just saw one chat. Would she be here if Ethan wasn't mad about Hasan? She should be, but we know the answer, and that's annoying and gross. So first of all, the reason why I'm here now is because I couldn't get a visa to US for a year and a half.
It's true. Ethan didn't want you to tell your story without these clips of Hasan.
Because of the wait time for an interview. And that's the only reason why I'm talking about it right now. And I did say it to Ethan before, a year before, and he suggested me to talk, like, maybe I should talk to Hasan. I just couldn't come here because I'm not in the office. I'm not, like, around, and I'm not a streamer. Because, like, stop saying, like, that Ethan brought me here a year and a half after just because right now he is, like, mad at Hasan. No, I've been like voicing it for a while, and Ethan has been voicing his concerns on leftovers for a while, and it's like the same exact take. Don't say that. That's wrong.
Yeah, they're just morons. You know what I mean? They're just like snark weirdos who are all members. But yeah, obviously, I think your story and your voice is super important, especially now. Again, an election.
Your story and your voice is super important. To criticize Hasan for it. Oh my God, I love this dude. Okay. All right, I'm not going to have time to find this clip, but I love how Ethan's like, your story and your voice is super important, especially with an election coming. Let's continue.
In 4 fucking days, that's going to affect all this a lot. So suck my dick.
Oh, yeah, because the Ukrainian vote is a major vote that Kamala Harris and Trump are fighting over. Who's going to support Ukraine harder? No one gives a fuck about Ukraine. Like, people still support it, but that's not the issue that they're voting on. I also love Ethan saying that, oh, well, I need to bring you on, especially because there's an election coming up. When Vosh said the exact same thing, why are you attacking me when there's an election coming up? Like, it's super disappointing. And Ethan's like, oh, go fuck yourself. Who do you think you are? You're so important. And yet he'll be like, we need to bring this person on because there's an election coming up. And then they go on to criticize Hasan for not explicitly endorsing and telling his audience to vote for Kamala Harris.
To that chatter, of
Yes.
course.
So again, just like they don't care about politics. They're just gonna say whatever they can to try to snipe at the people that they have in their crosshairs.
Kindly, please. I have a smorgasbord of dick for you to suck. Thank you.
Fucking
That's right.
Ukrainian.
Not too much.
Okay, they're
Yeah, too much.
Tatars.
Sorry about that.
So what's up? Does it belong to Turkey then? Is Crimea Turkish?
Fuck you. Fuck you for saying that like Tatars are a part of Turkey. First of all, Tatars are Ukrainian indigenous people. They've been
No, they're not Ukrainian indigenous. They're Crimean indigenous people. They're literally they were indigenous to Crimea, not Ukraine. Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I don't know the whole history of Ukraine, but was Crimea a part of Ukraine before it was kind of combined in the Soviet Union? I don't think so. Nothing on this has indicated that.
here. They've been in Ukraine. They've been in Crimea before Turkey invaded that country. I'm not here.
Okay, did Ukraine own Crimea before Turkey invaded? When did Turkey invade it? Some cities became trading colonies of Genoa until conquered by Ottoman Empire. Throughout this time, the interior was occupied by a changing cast of steppe nomads, coming under the control of the Golden Horde in the 13th century, from which the Crimean Khanate emerged as a successor state. In the 15th century, the Khanate became a dependency of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, where are the Okay, I'm gonna let this play. I'm gonna look up the Tatar
To do like
people
optics,
while this
who
is
got here
happening.
first? Let's do that. Okay, let's sell Alaska back to Russia, and actually all Native Americans in America are here because they came here from Siberia. So let's just give a half of world back to Russia and Turkey, apparently, just because it happened one time. But Crimean Tatars are an indigenous population that is a part of Turks ethnic group, but it doesn't mean that's like Turkish. Sorry.
Okay, but she said they were Ukrainian. She said that Crimean Tatars were Ukrainian in this rant, and that's what triggered her. I just don't think there's like a strong history of Ukraine with Russia, with Crimea. And that doesn't justify Russia annexing it, but it also doesn't justify this woman saying that Tatar people are Ukrainian. I don't think that's true at all.
Yeah. Yep.
Gaming.
You guys are so strange to make this argument all the time and fucking constantly bring up Crimea. Bro, it can be inhabited 100% Russian. It doesn't make the land Russia. What the fuck are you saying? What are you saying? Then what's the point then? Like, this is something I...
It's such a nonsense point. I mean, there's towns in California and across the border that probably have like a majority of Hispanic people. So what, Mexico should annex it? I mean,
And
what the fuck
you
are we
should
talking
actually
about?
go back to United Kingdom because they invented the language. So if you talk English, I think you need to be a part of that
like, oh,
colonization.
God, don't even joke.
Yeah, fucking.
It's no joke. I'm being serious. No, I hate UK. I'm sorry.
Oh man, it's so psychotic.
genuinely do not understand. Like, are you... What does that mean then? Then there's no reason. Like, there is no reason to fucking have...
And Hasan is actively encouraging his audience, as far as the last time I saw, not to vote. So I think like
Yes.
speaking directly
That's
against that is
just-
important.
I can't.
That's
believe
what
it.
Yeah, he is not doing that. We can get into that, but I'm gonna let this play a little bit more, and then we can come back to that. But these people criticizing Hasan for not doing enough to try to get Kamala Harris elected is a joke. Like, they obviously don't care too much about politics, and yeah, they've done, I mean, way less than Hasan has in terms of getting Democrats elected and getting Republicans just, castigated. We don't need to get into the whole conversation of their effective media coverage where they're only criticizing the left, right? They've only been criticizing the left since this whole drama started. They spent like 20 minutes criticizing the MSG rally that Trump did and just making fun of it. They didn't even act like anything was serious. The only serious political stuff they've done has been to criticize Hasan and Twitch and Frogan and stuff for being too much pro-Palestinian. I mean, that's not what they would say, but that's actually what they mean. So again, what is your effective coverage? There's a reason why Hasan doesn't spend all of his time talking about Ethan, because he actually cares about politics. He actually cares about his informing his viewers, and he cares about making a difference. Doing drama back and forth with Ethan Klein is going to detract away from this. It's going to, send like anger and energy at the wrong target. And that's kind of a reason why I'm doing this, because I don't think that big channels should be covering this in so much detail. It's honestly a waste of time. And I've felt that in covering this. I'm like, Trump just said that he wants to do the biggest deportation of people in history. Like, this is going to be the Trail of Tears 3.0. Should I really be covering Ethan, like, laughing about trying to get Hasan banned? Like, is this worth it? And I do want to cover other stuff, but at the same time, I think this is important, and I think like bigger channels shouldn't really cover this. So I'm kind of providing an avenue for people that want to cover it and want a good faith, in-depth analysis of what Ethan's saying. But again, like, criticizing Hasan for telling people to not vote is insane. He's literally never done that. And in fact, he's done the opposite. And we can get into that, but I'll let this play a little bit more.
I wanted to do, I did like a whole research. I was trying to find his endorsement for anyone, because like the only article I could find of him saying that he would never vote for Biden and then that he would never endorse Kamala unless she says something. And I'm like, you have such a huge audience and I really want that audience to vote. So you at least just like, I might not know that, like, from
Okay, it's kind of stupid to scour the internet for an endorsement from Hasan when he spent the entirety of his political career railing against Democrats and like railing against Republicans and begrudgingly supporting Democrats. There's a pretty clear distinction that he sets up. He's not here to say that all parties are bad. He even criticizes third parties. So if you're criticizing a third party, you're criticizing the Republicans, and you're criticizing Democrats, but not to the extent that you're doing either of those things, like, what do you think his audience is going to do? Also, he's compared Trump to Hitler like millions of times. So what do you think he would rather have happen?
what I found, I didn't see any proof that he's actually endorsing his audience to go vote.
No, he never
As
did.
the most political streamer in like the US, it's
It
like
was at the DNC at press
Yeah.
pass, and I'm
And
like,
got
dude.
kicked out
And then like
there.
these mainstream liberals keep having him on the show, like he's some normal fucking pundit. Like the Pod Save America guys had him on the show, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? This guy's literally telling his audience not to vote.
and he's like on a whole PR vacation to
Okay, well, we got to get into this. So, Ethan is talking about how liberal or like mainstream liberal people are talking with Hasan, and Ethan's flabbergasted by that. I mean, he had a podcast with Hasan not too long ago. He also just said that Hasan is telling his audience to not vote.
1,200 innocent people and took 250 hostages in
Damn, they hit Bernard with the 2 different camera angles on this one. That's crazy. They hit him with a cinematic, and yet they couldn't get him anti. That's fair. It's also not how this works anyway. Like,
All right.
Strip would make excellent beachfront property for development. And it is no wonder Netanyahu prefers to have Donald Trump in office. But even more importantly, and this I promise you, after Kamala wins, we will together do everything that we can to change U.S. policy toward Netanyahu.
he's right. You just don't need to bring up Biden and all this if you want to talk about this. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. It's also not how this works anyway. Like, it's just not a thing that people do. Like, the idea, the cold, hard, calculated, lesser evil voting mentality is not a is not a strong message whatsoever. It's not a strong message at all. It is demonstrably failed. And the reality of the matter is, for most people, if this is their one issue, I don't know if he'd be able to convince them. Like, if Kamala Harris, dude, here, I'm going to be radically honest with you, okay? Like, lesser evil voting, in theory, is correct, okay? It is. It just is. It doesn't matter, though, because that's not how people operate. That's number one. And number two, okay, not only is it not how people operate, but also beyond that, the Democratic Party takes advantage of that time and time again to move to the right on every single issue, even when it is actually sabotaging their own chances. And worst of all, if Kamala Harris had done anything, like anything at all, even marginally different than Joe Biden, to like distance herself from Joe Biden on this objectively unpopular issue, on this objectively unpopular thing, if she had even communicated a different perspective, then these arguments would make a little bit more sense. Okay? I will never tell you not to vote. Things aren't just right because you say so.
Wait, I thought Ethan just said that Hasan tells his audience to not vote. And now I'm hearing him say, I will never tell you not to vote? Wait, I'm so confused. We got to keep playing this.
What the fuck? Wait, what do you mean? Dude, it's literally 99% Hitler versus 100% Hitler. Technically, it is correct. 99% Hitler is better than 100% Hitler. What are you talking about?
Wait, and Hasan is saying that lesser evil voting is a correct idea to take when you're going into the voting booth. You should always vote for the 99% Hitler compared to the 100% Hitler. I thought Ethan was saying that he was telling his audience to not vote. Wait, is he just criticizing the Democrats? And is his analysis that he's providing saying that most people actually don't view it this way, but it's technically correct? So he's just analyzing the Democrats' tactics coming into this election. He's not actually telling people to not vote. And I mean, I'm not going to say that if Ethan did his research, he would know this, because if Ethan did his research, he wouldn't be attacking Hasan at all. But if the H3 staff like cared about Ethan and kind of knew what Ethan was going to be saying, then maybe they could do some research and have some responsibility as like any kind of thread of integrity that's left to them as like media producers, just not straight up spreading misinformation that Hasan is telling his audience to not vote, when there's a pretty recent clip. Like, how long ago was this posted? This was posted 5 days ago, 2 days before this fucking podcast that I'm watching was created. And this is a clip that's pretty easily definable as an area where Hasan would talk about voting. It's called Bernie Sanders' Perspective on Kamala Harris. Why would he not talk about voting there? It was not hard for me to find. I found it in like 2 minutes.
But that's not how it works. Like, that's not how anything works. The do you mean? Who the do you think you are? Instance of a lesser evil is nothing but motivated reasoning for for an either or fallacy. In a duopoly, it is unfortunately how that works. Also, I'm not even saying that like you should vote for Kamala Harris or you shouldn't vote for Kamala Harris at all. I don't know why you're so aggressive about this issue. Yeah, vote socialist. If you want to vote socialist, go ahead. You know, I'm not gonna convince you otherwise. The do you mean? As long as you're not voting for Donald Trump. They claim that they've been working around the clock.
Do I have to explain this anymore? Hasan's position, and I don't know if there's an exact clip where he explicitly says this outright, but his position has always been, you should vote for Kamala Harris. She is the lesser evil of Trump. You would maximize your output of your vote if you're voting for Harris. However, I cannot tell you to vote for her because Hasan knows the pain that so many people are feeling when they are witnessing a genocide that's happening because of the Democratic Party. Like, let's just get this straight. There is a large amount of responsibility on the Democratic Party for the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And because of this, Hasan cannot in good conscience tell his audience that they have to vote for Kamala Harris. He cannot endorse her in good conscience. All of his messaging is anti-Trump and pro-Harris in comparison. What he says, he explicitly says, don't vote for Trump. Trump is a fascist. Trump is a Nazi. Trump's Hitler 2.0. And he also says lesser evil voting matters. So if you put all of these together, even if you're not getting an explicit endorsement from Hasan, he's very clearly sending a message through all of the coverage that he's doing that Harris is the pick. Like, it is just straight up misinformation to say that Hasan's telling his audience to not vote.
Mainstream political streamer he is, and I'm like, yes, but if you are political, let's talk politics and let's go vote. I don't know, like
He literally tells his fans to vote. He tells his viewers to vote.
You for sure cannot make people vote for someone like certain, but you should encourage people always to go vote.
He doesn't want people to vote. That's what he wants. I don't know.
Yeah, he does. He does want people to vote. Like, you're just lying. You can find so many clips of Hasan telling people to vote.
Just really crazy stuff.
I mean, we need to fucking have like what, some fake boundary that we've decided
A border?
I don't know.
that we would have some fucking fake like the fake boundary is more important than like what the people that are living on that
Fake
land
boundary.
want. But to defend the borders of Ukraine, like what are you, a fucking 3%er for Ukraine? You're in here making arguments literally like oh dude, I don't care. We must defend Ukraine, brother. Are you fucking kidding me? Ukraine.
Thank you.
Crimea belongs to Ukraine. Don't matter if they're Russian and want to be a part of Russia. Don't matter. God damn it. The Ukrainian constitution declared Crimea to be a part of Ukraine. We must defend their borders.
He keeps saying that. It's like they're Russian and they want to be a part of Russia. It's like, what? That's not how it works, dude. That one's pretty insane.
Yeah, we can kind of stop here. Those two. The third one is him making a meme
Let's do
about
it. We're
Crimea
so close.
River.
What do you call Crimea? I call it a part of Russian territory, bitch. That's what I call Crimea. I call it Crimea River.
Nate stopped by to say, give me California. Nate,
Oh, in Discord.
yeah.
You should do a referendum.
Nate, half of what I own is yours, my friend.
A Russian river, that is. Russia.
Again, if they have if they're trying to meaningfully critique Hasan, why are they talking about this shit? Like, this is just a funny meme that he did. Okay, let's continue.
There's historic access into the Black Sea, Crimea, that's like historically fucking ethnically all Russian, majority Russian, overwhelming majority Russian, that is totally fine with the annexation, according to Western fucking sources that conducted polls after the original referendum. Man's acts like Crimea never happened. Man's acts like Crimea never happened. No, it happened. Okay? It happened. You're crying a river, okay? But you should cry me a river. I know it happened. L take.
I cried.
Thing to say.
I cried Hasan a river today.
Crimea.
You what?
I literally cried a
Crime.
river for him today.
Crimea River.
Yeah, happened.
You
It
cried in
happened.
a river.
Yeah.
A Russian river,
Oh yeah, of course. Only a Russian one.
just like you wanted.
This is insane.
Like, well, technically Crimea is Turkish. It's technically Crimea is technically
fuck?
a part of Turkish territory. It should be. It should
Motherfucker.
should be.
What is happening? This is nuts.
And
belong.
I worked in Turkey for
Wait a second. I thought they were accusing Hasan of doing only Russian propaganda. Why are they now saying that? Why are they showing this clip? Doesn't this disprove their entire theory that he's like a Russian propagandist and anti-Ukraine? Again, he's just making a point that like Crimea has been passed around for a long time. And that, yeah, I think you should go based off of what the people living in the area want. And there are a lot of people that have ties to Turkey that live in Ukraine. I think the last census said there was about 10% indigenous Tatars that were Turkish. So that's kind of funny. I think they're like the third highest demographic underneath Russia, and then Ukrainian, and then the Tatars.
7 months. So I could say that I'm Turkish apparently, or I should get Turkey to myself, or like whatever.
Motherfucker.
should be.
What is happening? This is nuts.
And
belong.
I worked in Turkey for 7 months. So I could say that I'm Turkish apparently, or I should get Turkey to myself, or like whatever. Like, I don't know, man. You're like, this is insane takes. And I don't know how no one brings it up. Everyone likes it.
This is, I feel like I'm going crazy because like like I said, he couches these super extreme things within like normal kind of political discourse. And I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, how are people not fucking understanding what's happening here? Like, I don't know why he's like so confident and so extreme. I don't know where those thoughts and opinions are.
I mean, the reason that people aren't really caring about this is that it doesn't matter. There's not really anything that we as Americans can do about it, and even people not in America can't really do anything about it. Ukraine's fighting a defensive war against Russia right now, and that's kind of the thing that matters. Hasan has been staunchly on the pro-Ukrainian side there. Once Ukraine gets rid of Russia in its own proper borders, then maybe it can start focusing on Crimea. But currently, as it stands, it doesn't matter. And so people aren't going to bring up this pressing top-of-mind issue in Crimea whenever they interview Hasan. When you get that CNN reporter interviewing Hasan at the DNC, when he goes on to Pod Save America, talking about it. They're not when he talks to Sam Cedar on the Majority Report, they're not going to be like, well, so what are your opinions on Ukraine, Hasan? Or what are your opinions on Crimea? And also the reason why people don't talk about Ukraine is because the United States is already supporting Ukraine. It's kind of settled. And the only people that are talking about it are conservatives that don't like supporting people fighting against fascists.
They're coming from. He thinks he's like a historian or a scholar or some shit. I don't know, or if there's more behind the scenes. I don't know. But like,
And
something is up here, and it's not
He's
good.
making a meme out of annexation of another country. Crimea River. This is like, okay, you can make jokes about anyone, free country, you're American, whatever. But like, I can't criticize you for that. And this is not funny. And your humor is like the same humor as an island of garbage in Puerto Rico or like whatever.
Right.
This is the same level. Crimea, a Russian river. Fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, and his whole chat. So this is
Wait,
like
I don't
someone,
think he
I
said
think
Russian
someone
river.
said it in chat one time. And this is like an ongoing meme. So whenever he brings Crimea after, this is like the only thing that you can see in the chat. Crimea.
I mean, you can tell it's an effective meme because you guys are focusing on it. Like, you could have stopped it at his defense of the annexation of Crimea, and now you're like getting outraged about this joke that he tells, which is completely unsubstantive. So why are you criticizing his chat for saying Crimea River when you're talking about it as well? Like, it's a dumb joke that Hasan said in response to his chat that apparently he's captured by, and you're critically analyzing the joke. It's pretty dumb stuff here.
Crimea River, haha, haha. Like,
Okay, that was funny
Yeah.
though. I gotta run it
in the
back.
chat, Crimea River, haha, haha. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
It's an insane like double standard where they yeah. I don't know why they won't give Ukraine this benefit of the doubt of being like a victim and like being colonized. Like he refuses to do
There
it.
is another clip, I didn't bring it up, but he's making a tier list of countries that should get Crimea. And he's like, so first it should be
great.
Crimean Tatars, because of course it's their country, and then it should be Russia, and then it should be Turkey, and then it should be Greece, and then it should be like another country, and only after I think Ukraine might be there. I'm like, this is
Sounds
insane.
like a warlord. Sounds like a psycho.
Okay, that is actually kind of a funny thing to do though. I mean, but seriously, just if you want to support the people in Crimea, then you should be supportive of them doing like a referendum on their own accord. And I know that was a stupid joke that Hasan was making about how many different empires had claims on Turkey. Or not on Turkey. Holy shit, I'm losing my mind. I'm so tired. Had claims on Crimea. Like, that's a stupid joke about that. But there is some truth to it. Like, it hasn't been tied to Ukraine too long. And there are a lot of Ukrainian people living in Crimea. So you should respect the sovereignty of the people living there. And yeah, just straight up, Russia didn't do it. So if you're going off of that 2014 referendum, I'm sorry, that just is an extremely undemocratic thing to do, and I think it's wrong to do as well.
Like imperialist warlord.
To the fucking to the Ottoman Caliphate. Okay, we will bring it back. We will restore honor and dignity to Crimea.
Actually, you're all part of Italy, so I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
It's time to secede, or it's time to bend the knee to Italy.
The Crimean Tatars will be liberated once again by their Turk.
Again, why are they getting mad about Hasan making a joke when they're making jokes about the exact same joke that they're doing too? So I think it is a lot of like performative outrage. If you were trying to be substantive in your criticism, you could have really ended it at that first clip and then the follow-up clip of Hasan saying the exact same thing. But seriously, it really kind of undercuts your point when you're criticizing the jokes that he's making and making your own jokes about it. And the exact same joke in the exact same context.
Okay, but it's fine. It's fine. For now, Russia, you take it. You take it for now, but eventually it will be ours once again.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
There's
one more.
One more is from, it's like the most recent one, because I know people are
Bro,
going to
it's
say that this is
literally
from
a
2020.
joke. Like, Ethan did the exact same joke of Italy taking over Crimea.
Too. So I found a clip from him defending annexation once the October 7th happened. So this clip is from October 2023, because a lot of people who were criticizing him before went back and were like, yeah, but you're like against any, you are pro Crimea annexation, so why are you saying that like Gaza should be liberated?
Yeah.
And this is like his response to that.
Okay. People are saying you're pro annexing of Crimea, and they're saying that's similar to what Israel's trying to do to Gaza.
Yeah, because it's like settling in another territory.
Definitely similar for sure.
That's not my take. That's like what those people has been telling him in chat from time to time after October 7th happened.
Let's see.
Shut off.
So just right off the bat here, there's a major difference between Russia annexing Crimea and having there be a lot of Russians living there already. And it's kind of hard to get data on the demographics in the 10 years since Russia annexed it, but let's just say that there wasn't a massive displacement of the Ukrainian and Tatar people that were there. And I'm sure there was a lot of people leaving Crimea, because why would you want to live in an occupied area underneath Russia? But let's just say that there wasn't like a massive displacement of the people that lived there. Well, there would be a massive displacement, a massive ethnic cleansing of pretty much any territory that Israel conquers, because Israel defines itself as an ethno-state and they need to maintain their Jewish supermajority of the demographics of its borders. And when a major reason why Israel doesn't want to incorporate the West Bank and Gaza into its borders and just become one state with equal rights for everyone is because then they would lose that supermajority of Jews in Israel, and it would be roughly 50% non-Jews and 50% Jews in Israel. And that is just untenable for Zionists that run that country. And so, yeah, even if you're like pro the annexation of, like, even if you're pro the annexation of Crimea by Russia, that doesn't mean that you're being hypocritical by being anti the annexation of Gaza by Israel, because Israel would kill everyone in Gaza or kick them out of those places. Russia doesn't define itself by its ethnicity, even though it might make it easier for them to annex a place because they're already speaking the language. They might have similar cultures, so there wouldn't be too much of a cultural shock. It might be easier, but they're not going to definitively like expel everyone from the area.
The entirety, so they can shut off the entirety of northern Gaza. Why is annexation difficult? I don't know. Ask motherfucking Russia, okay? Annexation is so fucking impossible to do unless the civilian population already is like, has been ethnically displaced a ton of years ago, like for hundreds of years, okay? I'll give you an example, okay? Russia cannot annex Ukraine, but Russia was able to annex Crimea with very little difficulty. There is a difference.
That's ahistorical, by the way. It's ridiculous.
First of all, Ukraine is not like a new country that has been like magically appeared in 1991 since the Soviet Union fell apart. Ukrainian culture has been belittled for centuries by Russian culture. It's like whole media propaganda for centuries, and we've been killed, we've been displaced, we've been, our country has been like cut into bits every 40 years or so in the history. And if you ever had a Ukrainian history class, then my condolences to you, because this is insane. Like every single day that you need to learn is insane. Like we're a part of Poland, now we're a part of Lithuania, now we're a part of like Russia, and like bits in here and here. And Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language, Ukrainian cities are older than anything that is being built in Russia, or like Moscow has been built 300, I don't know how many years after. I was really bad at that class then, sorry. But like don't know the exact amount of years, but Ukrainian culture has been set up before Russian culture. And those cultures are definitely two different cultures, two different languages that Russians cannot understand any Ukrainian language. And this is all propaganda. And whatever he says, that's insane. Because he says, first of all, Crimea has been ethnically cleansed for hundreds of years. This is completely false. Crimea was ethnically genocided. It was they displaced Crimean Tatars population in 1944. It was 80 years ago, and then those people came back, and like as many as could, they were just sent to eastern part of Russia, and then they went back because this is their country, this is their culture, this is their heritage. And for him to say this was hundreds of years ago, this doesn't matter, like whatever, and he just brushes off like this historical fact and like
That's
giving
how
a
old
number.
Israel is, just to show the hypocrisy. Israel's 80 years old, so should it not matter? Like,
and like what?
Bro, Ethan's a fucking dumbass. I'm not even gonna respond to that. So Galia is correct in this. The Tatar people were displaced in 1945, I believe, when the Soviet Union, I already read this, but the Soviet Union took Crimea back from Germany. 1944. So just reading the Wikipedia article, after the Soviets regained control in 1944, they deported the Crimean Tatars and several other nationalities to elsewhere in the USSR. So she's absolutely correct. And then they dissolved the Autonomous Republic of Crimea in 1945, and it was transferred to the Ukrainian SSR. It became an oblast of the Russian SFSR, and then it was transferred to the Ukrainian SSR in 1954. So from 1954 to 1991. So that would be what, like 37 years. So for 37 years, it was part of Ukraine underneath the Soviet Union. And then for another 25 years, it was part of Ukraine as like an autonomous region of Ukraine. And before that, I don't think there was like a huge connection with Ukraine. And then if we look at the demographics, the last census was in 2014. So before Russia annexed Crimea, and you do have a 67% being ethnically Russian, 15.7% being ethnically Ukrainian, and 10% being ethnically Tatar. So when Hasan says that Russia was able to annex Crimea because there were Russians living there, that's just correct. And the Russians were pretty much put in there 80 years ago. In 1944, they displaced the Tatar people. And if we look at the census in 1939, they were 19% of the population. So basically, that population has been halved in the 80 years before Russia annexed it. And I think that does make a lot of sense. And that's part of Russia's colonization tactics, where they will seed that area with people that speak the Russian language, have similar culture to Russians, might even have Russian sympathies, and maybe more susceptible to Russian propaganda. And so what Hasan said here is completely correct. Russia was able to annex it using tactics. And this outrage that we're getting from these people being like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that they displaced these people. That's not what Hasan's saying at all. He's not saying it's a good thing that the Tatar people were displaced, or that it doesn't matter that they were displaced. He's saying it was easier for Russia to annex Crimea because they were displaced. It's literally a tactic of colonization. And so, again, not really understanding, and Ethan has no idea what's going on. He's like, oh, well, they said that Israel's only 80 years old, so does it not matter for Israel? And again, Hasan's not saying that it doesn't matter that they were displaced. He's saying that they were as part of the way that this imperial power colonizes the land that they're taking over.
Just finish, and I have my point.
Why? Because the ethnic Crimean Tatars had already been ethnically displaced for hundreds of years. So the majority of the Crimean population was already Russian. That's why.
And just for a bit of more context, the furthest back the census goes on Wikipedia, we have in 1785, the Crimean Tatars were 84% of the population of Crimea. And then in that ethnic displacement, they went from 19.4% in 1939 to just 0.2% in 1979. So they were like extremely ethnically displaced. And then since that 1979 census, they've been slowly coming back and back and back and moving back to their native homeland of Crimea. But you can still see a significant drop. And when Hasan says that these people, the indigenous people, were displaced for hundreds of years, he is just factually correct. Even though Galia says that they move back as much as they can, which is true, their population levels are at 10% of the total Crimean population when they were at 84% in 1785.
There's a major difference between, for example, the annexation of Crimea versus the invasion of Ukraine.
Also,
You
what is the
cannot
difference? What is the difference between doing a referendum in my town and doing a referendum in Berdan?
Okay, so I think they're kind of misunderstanding Hasan's point. Hasan's point is that it's harder to annex Crimea, or it's harder to annex Ukraine because they didn't do that kind of seeding of settlers in Ukraine the same way that they did in Crimea. There was tons of propaganda in Crimea, and there was this ethnic shift where Russia displaced a ton of people that were living there and filled it with Russians. That is a colonization tactic, and that made it easier for Russia to annex it, and not only annex it, but keep control of it. They've now had control of it proper for 10 years, and not only did they have control of it proper for 10 years, since 1991, Crimea has insisted on being its own autonomous region. So not only did they annex it easier, but they kind of had the groundwork laid for them already because of all of this large enclave of Russians in Crimea that had kind of created this separation from Crimea and the rest of Ukraine. So I think Hasan's analysis here is spot on, and I think this is a departure of those earlier two clips that they played. And this is a year later, to be fair. This clip is from a year later. This clip is from 2023. Those first two clips are from 2022 when the invasion first happened. And I think it's a departure in the sense that Hasan is starting to recognize Russian colonial tactics of seeding the lands that they want to colonize with people that, let's just say, are more sympathetic to Russian causes and Russian culture, and thus are able to be annexed and kind of ruled by Russians more easily. And Hasan's making the point that Russia's not able to annex Ukraine because the Ukrainian people are resisting Russia.
In Crimea, what is the difference? Like, it's the same exact guideline that Russia follows, with same like every region in Russia, in Ukraine, with Donetsk, with Luhansk, with Crimea, with my town, with all the territory. It happens once after, like one after one after one after one, just like getting expanded, and like it's getting bigger. And he's saying that Russia couldn't successfully annex a country who is not willing, but it happened with my region. Like, it already happened. I don't know what he's talking. Like, it was 3 weeks after the referendum that happened in my town, and he's like, yeah, Russia is not like doing that. It's already done it by that.
I mean, he literally said Russia did that exact same thing to Crimea. The only difference between Russia's annexation of Crimea and Russia's annexation of other Ukrainian towns that are on kind of the border between Ukraine and Russia is that it's just speeding up the process. In Crimea, the ethnic displacement took place over hundreds of years, and there was like a very long buildup of economic and political pressure on Crimea, not to mention propaganda. And in these Eastern European or Eastern Ukrainian towns, they're sending settlers in a matter of months and displacing the population in a matter of months. And obviously using extreme military pressure to annex these places. So it's just different tactics, a different form of the same tactics, a lot more militarily based, even though they use military to annex Crimea. But again, I don't think she's really arguing. I don't think she's really refuting anything that Hasan's saying. She's kind of saying that, basically, if they were having a conversation, it would be Hasan's like, this is how Russia annexed Crimea, and she would be like, okay, and this is how they're annexing other Ukrainian cities, and that's kind of the extent of the conversation. They're just describing two different ways of Russia's colonial tactics.
Time. I don't know, like, this is insane.
It's not insane.
A country,
you guys aren't disagreeing.
And assume that you can just maintain this country. America can't even fucking do it. The only way to be able to full-blown annex a nation and maintain its population is by basically doing some kind of genocide. They can shut.
So you can do economical genocide to a region. You can do economical power, like triggering, because Ukraine is really vulnerable to Russia, and it's like year after year, my region was dependent on Russian economy as well, and like that's why the whole Euromaidan happened, because Russia was pulling a trigger on gas and like on heating, on everything that like could happen in your country, and they were just like manipulating every single decision in your country, and like the whole, you can read it out, but like this has been happening. This is not like a 2 weeks decision. Putin has been doing it for like 10 years prior to that, like year after year after year after year, and we're just like looking at that week after week after week. Okay, like one more town, okay, it doesn't matter. But then I don't know why you would ever protect Palestine but say that something else is completely justifiable. And this.
Okay, so I know he did say that the annexation of Crimea is justifiable. I do think he would change his mind if pressed on that now. And once again, the annexation of Crimea is completely different than the annexation of Palestine. Basically, let's just use the example of Israel and Gaza. If Gaza was like 70% ethnic Arab Jewish people, and then Israel sends in their military, forces them to do a referendum, and then says Gaza is ours now, that would be analogous to Russia's annexation of Crimea. What isn't analogous is Israel bombing the hell out of Gaza, displacing the entire population, and then just rebuilding it with their settlers. That's not analogous at all. And again, not trying to really criticize Galia too much, but it is genocide denial to say that the annexation of Crimea is anything similar to what we're seeing in Gaza. And I think that if pressed on this, she would kind of walk this statement back. And I know what's happening in Ukraine is horrible, but it's incomparable to what's happening in Gaza. You have so much systemic support. The biggest superpower in the world is supporting Ukraine. So many countries are accepting refugees and providing not only aid to the people there, but arms for those people to fight back. And that is just people in Gaza can't even dream about that kind of support.
This is like the only take that I wanted to bring here today, because this is the most important one, because Crimea is the first spot of Russian-Ukrainian war. This annexation of Crimea is like the first point of the timeline. And after that, I can bring you like 200 more of his takes that are crazy on like Zelensky or like on Boris Johnson or whatever. Like he believes that Euromaidan was made by Americans or whatever. I can bring you so much more, but I wanted to bring like one point of completely erasing the whole reason why the war started, erasing like everything at the beginning, but saying that, yes, I support Ukraine. I support that. I support them now. I just don't support the part that started all of this. This is, I don't know. So that's it. Sorry for being
No, that was good.
so
I'm
long.
glad you shared all that.
Yeah, don't be sorry.
Has he changed any of these opinions on Ukraine since these clips? Has he said anything about it?
So the last one that I brought there was October 2023.
I mean, once again, they're not criticizing Hasan's actual stance on Ukraine. They're criticizing his stance on the annexation of Crimea, which, I'm sorry, that happened 10 years ago, 8 years before Russia straight up fully invaded Ukraine. I would say that's a lot less relevant than what Russia did now. And I know that it is the official start of the Ukrainian-Russian war. Like I had a Ukrainian friend in school who I specifically remember in 2014. I'm like, hey, what are you doing this summer? He's like, I'm going to Ukraine to kill some Russians. I'm like, have fun doing that. I'm going to go play Legos. So that is a very important event for Ukrainians. And it's honestly a ridiculous thing that Obama let happen, where you do have another example of Russia just grabbing up a section of land. All of this being said, they're misrepresenting Hasan's position on the support of Ukraine. By extrapolating his view on Crimea, they're implying that he is actually anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia. And she says her latest clip is from 2023. She's specifically only focused on Hasan talking about Crimea. And I know she's trying to justify it by saying that, well, this is how the war got started. But that's not really the war. That's not really the context that a lot of Americans view the war through. They view the war when Russia started invading Ukraine proper. And I think that is a relevant distinction to make, because that's when, like, it was almost like a Cold War between Russia and Ukraine. There just straight up wasn't this kind of like World War II, World War I style engagements that we're seeing now. And I think it is disingenuous to only be criticizing Hasan on this and then just saying that, oh, well, there's all of these other clips that I can show you of Hasan being bad on the subject of Ukraine, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to focus on his thing on Crimea. And the reason they're not doing it is because Hasan's always been supportive of Ukraine. He's had some weird takes on Crimea, especially not being able to identify Russia colonizing, like Russia's colonization tactics when they annexed Crimea. That's extremely strange to me, because I feel like Hasan's extremely good at calling out Western imperialism. But still, it is just disingenuous to frame Hasan in this position. I think I've explained that well enough.
And
A year.
yeah, it was a year ago. Since then, his stream is more about Palestinian war. Since then, I saw him comparing how many children died in Ukraine and in Palestine, and not in a good way. I saw him retweeting like comparison.
Saying not in a good way is, again, not trying to criticize this producer, this researcher that Ethan brought on to badmouth Hasan too much, because really all of my criticism should be on Ethan. But and I can understand why she would center herself in this conversation. And I can understand the idea that, oh, if you're talking about Palestine, you're not talking about Ukraine. That's a justifiable thing. And the fear that you see the fear that you would feel as you see support for Ukraine seemingly wane in America, and when Republicans are talking about pulling support for Ukraine. But it does kind of remind me of the adage that when you're privileged, you and when you're used to being privileged, then equal rights feels like oppression. And you can kind of see that she's in this position where Ukraine is being supported, and now Palestinian rights are trying to be supported, and you almost can feel that they're like competing. And I know that there's no like oppression Olympics, no one wins in oppression Olympics. However, that is kind of the way that American politics views it as, especially when we're talking about who we're going to send money towards. And materially, that's not an accurate way to look at it. We're sending old military supplies to Ukraine. We're sending food to Palestine. Like, those are completely different things. We can do both. But when we're talking about the budget, Republicans view it like that, and a lot of Americans view it like that as well. However, just saying like, oh, Hasan compared the amount of children being killed in Ukraine, which is a war we're supporting, and we're justifiably outraged by the amount of children being killed there, to the amount of children being killed in Gaza, who we're supporting the killing of, and he did that in not a good way. That's a stupid thing to say. That's a very dehumanizing thing to say, and just not very like clued into how support really works in this country. When you have so much support for Ukraine and then support for the killing of children in Gaza, I think you can kind of compare it however you want to get more support for Palestinians.
And like, why do we care about this when we have this? Which, whenever
It's
you
their favorite talking.
whenever you do kind of like charts for civilians dead, and you're like bringing it as a talking point, I don't know what to say to that. Like, honestly. And like, there are so many people who are not officially marked as killed in Ukraine just because they are officially missing.
So many dead
And you can,
Same with
you
Palestine.
can watch documentaries about Mariupol. You can learn about Bucha. You can learn about Kharkiv. You can learn. So, and the most important part is we are not choosing to fight in the war. No soldiers want to actually participate in the war. We are defending our country. This is our mandatory service. And this is like nothing that we take a chance even like to choose. My dad gets to be drafted, and he's 57 years old. He still has like 3 years before drafting age, and he just went the whole medical examination to see like, and he's got so many health issues that says that they put him in reserve by now, but they can't still draft him at 57 years old. And it doesn't matter if like so many of those soldiers are dead already, like, and we don't know the correct number because of course the war is going on, and we will not know for a couple, I don't know, decades more. But I'm trying to say that even if it's like soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers are not choosing to fight this war. They're like actually dragged from their towns, from their homes to fight.
Right.
They don't have any ammunition. They don't have any money to do that. They're doing fundraisers to get like a, I don't know, to get like a helmet, which is like, every time I see it, every time I see my friends, my co-workers that are being drafted, it's like a whole fundraiser. Let's get me some
That is
equipment.
fucking
Let's get me a
crazy,
drone.
dude.
Let's get me at least something. Or like my car has been bombed. Let's get me a new one. And you can see like a whole like of those fundraisers going on just because we don't have money. We don't have like, Ukrainian soldiers are getting one of the highest salaries in Ukraine, and it's like $2,500.
Yeah.
Again, just to respond to this, everything she said is horrible. Like, these people are defending their country, and they do deserve support. If you're going to say that, if you're trying to say that like you shouldn't compare Palestinians to this, though, that again, that's disingenuous. There's so much support for Ukraine, and complaining about people comparing Palestinians to Ukrainians, to say like, oh well, Palestinians deserve help too. It's just bad, man. Like, I don't want you to I don't want to like people that are going through hardships to compete against each other, and that is a thing that's happening.
I think it's very brave of you to tell your story, and I think it's important for a lot of people to hear because, of course, you know better than anyone. I was just curious because I don't keep up that much, but I knew he was doing a fundraiser for Ukraine. So I was surprised seeing some of those clips.
I know he's done it after all of those clips because he was wrong about invasion of Ukraine. And no, like everyone, that's
Oh my God. saying he's wrong about the invasion of Ukraine is so dumb. Like, Hasan saying that Russia wouldn't invade Ukraine is completely irrelevant. And he's always couched that in saying that it would be really dumb for Russia to invade Ukraine, so they probably won't do it. And they ended up doing it, and it turned out it was extremely stupid. So her saying that he's wrong about the invasion of Ukraine is a very meaningless criticism, as she said that Ukrainians didn't think Russia would invade Ukraine. And also, like, really want to shout out this producer AB for kind of saying that Hasan does support Ukraine, because no one has said that at all. In fact, Ethan has said that Hasan supports Russia, when he very clearly supports Ukraine. And this is obviously a hit piece on Hasan. They've only had like 3 clips that made Hasan look extremely bad, and no clips that actually show him supporting Ukraine, which is his actual position.
What I'm saying, but this is like limited hangout. He's doing 90% of extremely good stuff that I support, and I see he is a hard worker. He's been streaming for like 9 hours for like 3 years, 4 years.
The problem isn't like the fundraising and all that is good, right? But the dangerous thing is the fucking propaganda, the crazy narratives that he's pushing. And so like they're 2 separate things. Like doing the fundraiser doesn't in any way negate like. And I'm not saying you say that.
No. It's good that I encourage everyone to, like, if anyone has questions.
Dude, acting like 2 clips from 2 years ago is Hasan pushing crazy propaganda is just like the definition of bad faith. Hasan hasn't talked about Crimea in years, and like the last clip you found of him, which was literally a year ago, he was describing the way that Russia annexed it. He was describing the strategies and tools that a colonial power used to take over a bordering territory. How is that pushing insane propaganda? And I know that Galia was saying that, oh, well, he's ignoring the fact that Russia's doing that to eastern Ukrainian cities too. Okay, like he could add that. That doesn't contradict anything that he was saying. So again, the first clip of Hasan saying that Russia didn't do imperialism on Crimea, pretty bad. That's Hasan's worst take I've ever seen, to be honest. But the second clip, that almost seemed to refute that, because he's literally describing how a colonial power uses strategies to better colonize their neighbors. And then, of course, like not actually saying anything that not actually playing anything that Hasan said on specifically Ukraine, even though Galia is saying that, oh, I have so many clips, but I'm not going to play any.
I admire him doing a fundraiser. I'm just saying that, like, if you do a fundraiser, that doesn't
didn't
mean
even bring up the fundraiser.
Like,
the fuck,
right about
you're complaining so much about people asking for fundraisers, and then the producer's like, "Well, Hasan did do a fundraiser." She's like, "Oh, Hasan compared to the amount of Ukrainian children dead to the amount of Palestinian children dead, and not in a good way." And then she goes on this rant about how the Ukrainians are struggling, like Hasan is contributing to that struggle by comparing Palestinians to Ukrainians. And then the producer says, okay, well, he did raise like a lot of money, and he did. I think he raised like $200,000 in 20 minutes of playing Elden Ring.
Topics. And when I wrote that letter, I was thinking about Hasan as media. I know that a lot of times he's saying that he's like a little streamer streaming from his little room and he's like a nobody, but we need to kind of like understand that he's more influential than any media resource in US. And like we need to criticize if we don't like his takes, just like as we criticize Fox News, as we criticize anything else that's happening. I just feel like,
man, those takes were 2 years old. You haven't played anything since then. Like, people can change their opinions. You're not playing Ethan's takes from like 5 years ago when he's shitting on Hasidic Jews in Israel, are you? Like, where is this coming from? And of course we know the answer. It's coming from Ethan attacking Hasan for this past few weeks.
It's really important for him to at least think about like what's been going on. I don't want him to be banned. I don't want him to be like erased from internet universe.
Literally, he's been thinking about what's going on in Crimea because he did a pretty accurate analysis of how Russia was able to annex it. So it seems like he's thought about it as much, if not more, than you have.
I just want him to take accountability. I want him to do research on some topics. I want him to bring more Ukrainian people. He's never, to my knowledge, he's never brought a Ukrainian person
Okay,
on.
I'm not trying to pause at every few words, but she's like, I want him to do research. He accurately described the history that you then went on to describe, that the ethnic Tatars were displaced over hundreds of years, and that's why it was easier for Russia to take it over. So it seems like he's pretty researched on the topic of Crimea.
His like stream. I want him to talk to Ukrainian politicians, which are incredibly open to any U.S. media. They're begging to talk about the war happening, and that's like only my take. And I don't want him to like be banned and hated by everyone. And I'm sorry that like we get to do this for 2 hours, but just because like he wouldn't respond to any critiques that were told to him before. There's like a whole video from I think Dylan Burns showing Hasan's take to Ukrainians, to actual Ukrainians who are living under the war and their reactions. And someone in the chat sent this video to Hasan, and he just immediately like brushed it off and said that like Dylan is a war pervert and whatever, and I don't want to do that. Or like whenever, obviously like knowing.
Bro, Hasan never responds to direct criticism. You can criticize him for that, but it's kind of getting old to bring up every example of someone criticizing Hasan and him ignoring it. And I feel like when you're a streamer that big, you kind of have more responsibilities than responding to all of this drama, like what I'm doing. If I had millions of subscribers, I probably wouldn't be covering this. Just saying, I feel like I would be doing more important stuff.
Endorsement for Willy Makashow, like whatever his name is, but he's done some critiques on Hasan, and Hasan himself brought him on his podcast, on his stream, and that's how I learned about Willy, because he was like, let's debate about your critical videos. And I was like, okay, that's good stuff, because he's been criticizing him about Ukraine, and Willy went there, and he was like, so did you see the videos? And he was like, no, why would I watch them? Like, I don't care. And they're like 20 minutes videos. And he brought him on his live stream, and he wants to talk with him about like critical points that guy created, and Hasan is like completely brushing it off right in front, like in that face. He's like saying, I didn't watch the video. Like, bro, it's 20 minutes. It's like 10 TikToks long. You can do it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I
but
agree.
it's not towards you.
No, of course. No, I know. And for those of you who don't know, me and Gail have probably worked together the most out of the people on the crew in the past year. I'm just asking these questions. And
I see a parallel between like this Palestinian struggle and the Ukrainian struggle, but for some reason, I guess maybe I don't know if I missed
the reason is that American government supports Ukraine.
I mean, was Ethan going to say for some reason Hasan doesn't support Ukraine? Because he's always supported Ukraine.
More. But it doesn't matter. We need, in my understanding...
I mean, what Galia said there, that the American government supports Ukraine more, that's why Hasan is talking about Gaza as much as he is, because he's trying to create this groundswell of public support to force politicians to change their stances. That's why he's covering Gaza, and he hasn't been talking about Ukraine as much. The American government ended up being on the right position in supporting Ukraine, and they're just on the wrong position of supporting Gaza, and thus you have to work against that.
In my understanding, I would say let's vote for Kamala, and let's encourage that political movement to actually change, and let's push them to do more things in actual government than putting them off the leading position and bringing their Trump and just crying for years.
Yeah.
We should vote, and we should endorse, and we should create local movements, local political movements, like AB Dad does, like everyone else does locally. And Hasan should encourage that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has.
And I agree. It's not like a competition of what's worse.
Yes.
But in regards to, and I'm glad to hear your opinion on it, but him talking about the comparison of deaths and children, it's like this overarching thing that I feel like as Muslims or Arabs, I know Hasan's not Arab, but we just have this feeling of we've had this feeling people just don't give a fuck about us. And I'm sure, you're feeling the same right now.
I know that feeling.
But yeah, just on that one point, the comparison between the two conflicts.
Oh, I got a visa to work in Canada. Palestinians can't get food. So I totally know the feeling that people don't care about you. People definitely care about Ukraine. I'd say isolated people care about Ukraine, and definitely in comparison to Gaza, people care about it. Again, we're not doing a Persian Olympics, but I do think it's incomparable.
Everyone was, from my point of view, everyone's up in arms initially about Ukraine, and not so much about what was going on in Palestine.
Yeah,
But
that's
That's
just
not, again, it's not a
true-
comparison thing, but
an
I'm saying that's
objective truth.
I completely
That's what-
agree. Yes.
the sentiment.
I
comes
guess
from.
we're in different circles because
Yeah.
online, what I see, like, because I'm more involved with leftist
Gross
politics, I
stuff
see the
from
opposite.
Ethan here.
I feel like.
I did see a turn in Ukrainian support in last year, and especially like when Trump started running for president, and like he's like weird. Every time they did an interview with him, he brought the number up of like whatever billions of dollars we gave to Ukraine, and
We're giving. Okay. Just real quick. So in 2023, the U.S. provided $17.9 billion in military aid to Israel. Since 2022, the Palestinians got, or since October 2023, the Palestinians got $1 billion, but who knows how much of that actually went there. In Ukraine, we got $64 billion to Ukraine, and this is like worth of military assistance. So $17.9 billion in a year, $64.1 billion in 2 years, basically three, let's say 2.5, or let's say 3 years. And this is $1 billion in a year. Who do we think the United States cares more about? Who do we think has more or less support by people? And I don't give a fuck if Ethan's in like a leftist online space where all of his comments are Palestinian flags or like watermelon emojis. Let's look at the numbers. You can look them up. It doesn't take that long. 1 billion compared to 17.9, probably 18 by now, and 66 billion for Ukraine. You tell me where there is less support. Ukraine, Israel, or Palestine? Who has the least amount of support?
he was like 50, 60, 100, 200, who gets to get more? And it's like completely false. He says that it's like totally fake. He's going to end the war in 24 hours. And I can see that kind of like toggle moving.
Hey, he might end the war.
Ukrainian
It's just
support,
not
'cause
going to be
everyone's like,
in
I'm
a
paying my
good spot
taxes
for
for like
Ukraine.
you to get here. And you're like,
Yeah,
what the
no,
fuck?
there's a big movement on the conservative side to abandon Ukraine, and it's starting to take foot in the left side too because of opinions like Hasan's expressing. Anyway,
Bro, ridiculous, Ethan, ridiculous. Galya's brought up specific examples of people being anti-Ukraine. What are the examples? Trump saying we're spending too much money, that anti-immigration movement in Poland, and some people that are anti-immigrant in Vancouver, which is the city she lives in. All of those people are conservative. AB's brought up the idea that Hasan raised, I think it ended up being like $500,000 for Ukraine. So Hasan raises $500,000 for Ukraine. They haven't played any opinions of Hasan on actually Ukraine. They've just talked about Crimea. They haven't played any opinions from Hasan on Ukraine in the last year. Every video I've looked up when you search Ukraine on Hasan's YouTube has been pro-Ukraine. They ignore all of that. Ethan has no evidence that there's any left pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine movement at all. But he just says it. And this is why, like, I think Ethan is just really doing this whole section to attack Hasan. I don't think I need to do too much convincing. I think it's pretty obvious. And I could go harder on Ethan. I'm just trying to do a real like illustration of the overall picture. And I think just I don't even want to say disingenuous because I think Ethan's being genuine in how much hate he has towards Hasan right now. And I've said it before, I don't want to psychoanalyze too much, but it does seem that Ethan's just in a really bad spot with so much criticism coming his way because of his stance on Gaza and all of this like anguish and hatred that's bottling up inside him. He's just decided to make Hasan his target, and he wants some satisfaction to see Hasan get taken down. Why do you think he was so happy when Richie Torres sent that letter to Twitch? Why do you think he's attacking Twitch? Twitch's CEO. He wants Hasan to get taken down. That's what Ethan wants to see. And he's just making stuff up to do it. He's saying now that, oh yeah, we're seeing so much anti-Ukrainian posts from leftists. Even though Ethan's like, well, in my progressive online circles, I guess he said that in my progressive online circles, there's less support for Ukraine. But obviously, like, we know why people are more focused on Gaza, because the United States isn't focusing on Gaza. Like, they're not supporting Gaza.
I have to go. I'm
Yes.
so late. Thank you for sharing. I think it's important. Thank you. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. All right, I have to run, guys. It's Friday.
I'm done. Ethan sucks, and I still have so much more coverage to do, but I'm fucking tired. Anyway, guys, like, subscribe. I'm taking this channel off. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the week, and I do want to do some more election coverage. I want to cover some stuff other than this drama, but there's still so much to cover with this drama, so stay tuned. I haven't really seen it, but I'm excited to get into it. All of your comments are making it worth it, and let's keep going.